Hello, everybody. Welcome to Life After Beyond. Hello, Kelly White.
Hi, James. Hi, everybody.
We're getting a good opening. They're working on the opening right now.
Yes.
So we're getting that because
Good.
that's kind of like. So, how are you, Kelly?
I'm just great. How are you doing?
Good. We're going to see each other in a couple of days in Chicago.
Can't wait.
We're going to do an event in Chicago together, everyone.
Yes.
So that's Thursday night. That'll be a lot. That is something that's just getting me through these times.
That's right. Oh, we're gonna have a great time.
Some positive things, when things seem crazy.
Yes,
it's crazy. And tonight's show it's really an interesting show. And Kelly, as a therapist, first of all, we have a guest in Jessica Waite, and she wrote a book, "The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards," which I think is a great title. I'm like, that's great.
I predict a bestseller.
Yeah, and it's a bestseller already in Canada, which is great. And it's all about betrayal. Mm-hmm. And I know, Kelly, as you and myself, we deal with a lot of it. You from a therapist and a mediumistic point of view.
Yes, I've had many clients that have had this experience of being betrayed. I think everybody that listens to the show tonight will have either had an experience of betrayal, because when you come to Earth, you have betrayal. Or you will you'll know somebody who's had a situation similar. They maybe not the whole story, but certainly big parts of this. But this is such a unique, fabulous, interesting story. I could not put this story down, James. I couldn't put it down. I read it word for word.
And I know for everybody that when they pass over and they come back from the spirit world, they will often talk about, and one of the hardest things when we pass over, of course. We have a life review, and we become aware of the things we didn't do, but we become aware of how you treated someone else and how they felt. You take on how they felt 10 times, 20 times, 30 times stronger than originally it happened. You feel that. And that's when it's like, and you can't do anything about it. So many times, when we talk about purgatory, the religious, I think that could be that world, that space, that realm where you're stuck with what you did or didn't do. And many times it's resentment, it's betrayal, it's dishonesty, and spirit people don't have a chance to come back and say, "I'm sorry," very often. And that's where we come in, mediums come in. Right. But this is one of the first ones, which is really great about the spirit that Jessica found out afterwards about the betrayal.
And what I find so fascinating about this story is that her ability to write it, her ability to tell the story of what happened to her is extraordinary. And she's a first-time writer. So
junior writer.
First-time writer, and it's beautifully written, and it will capture your attention. So let me read a little bit about this for you, everybody. And then we'll bring her on. Jessica Waite is a debut author. In fact, the Washington Post recommended this as a July read.
Great.
A widow's life is turned upside when she uncovers the truth about her late husband in this lyrical, witty, and deeply moving memoir of tragedy and betrayal. In the midst of mourning her husband's sudden death, writer Jessica Waite discovered shocking secrets that undermined everything she knew about the man she'd loved and trusted, from uncovered affairs to drug use and a pornography addiction. Waite was overwhelmed reconciling this devastating information with her new reality as a widowed single mother. Then, to further complicate matters, strange and inexplicable coincidences forced her to consider whether her husband was reaching back from beyond the grave.
Mm-hmm.
With her signature candor and unflinching honesty, Waite details her tumultuous love story and the pain of adjusting to the new normal she built for herself and her son. A riveting, difficult, and surprisingly beautiful story, The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards is also a lyrical exploration of grief, mental health, single parenthood, and betrayal that demonstrates that the most moving love stories aren't perfect. They're flawed and poignantly real. Please welcome Jessica Waite. Hi,
Jessica.
Hi. Welcome. Thank you so much. What a joy to be here.
Oh my gosh. Bravo for being so brave.
Yeah, that took a lot, and really kudos to do this.
Because
When you wrote this book, was it healing for you to write the book? Like,
Yes, absolutely. So
what
that
was the
was
reason?
just the initial goal, to catharsis, healing, the therapy of writing and journaling. I'm sure, Kelly, you probably tell the people that you see how effective that can be, and never really any intention to publish it until once it got out of my head and onto the page, and I started to have some distance and started to realize, oh, this is a little bit of an unusual story, just the way that the events laid out, and maybe something that could be helpful for other people. Because I think even though things stack up in a strange way, it's sort of like you were saying, Kelly, at the beginning, like everyone has been betrayed. Everyone, wonders what happens when we die. Everyone could lose somebody unexpectedly or expectedly and just have so many questions. So, yeah.
well, what makes this story so compelling to me is that it's a cautionary tale on a lot of levels. I mean, it really does, I would think, help people look at red flags, look at people's behavior, look at what you're dealing, not having fear. And the fact that you were able to write this in such a beautiful way to tell the story will help so many people that have had loss and betrayal, which is, I've had many clients that have had parts of your story. And it's really hard for them when they have passed over. What do you do with the rage and the anger and the grief? Because it becomes complicated grief at this point.
And answer that for us, Jessica. What do you do with that?
Yeah, that was the question that I sort of had in my heart. What am I going to do? Because I knew that if I did nothing, like if I could have just kept muscling through my days and just try to go back to, a bit of the life that I had before. But my heart was completely shut down. And if I had done that, it would have led me to a life of like bitterness and resentment. And I knew that I couldn't go on that way. And so I had to try something else. And so that's why I ended up, just opening my mind a little bit to things that I might not have been willing to look at before in terms of questions and healing modalities.
And before you go on, because there's so much to ask you, this just popped in my head. Do you think your husband helped you write the book?
Do I think that? Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
I know that. I just know that. You felt him at certain times. You felt him when you were writing, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I even I tell this in the story, but one of the things that happened to even allow me to make these discoveries was that I guessed his password. And so, I kind of skim over it as I'm telling the story, but it's like, I guess the password that he used to use when, things were better. And I knew when he was sharing his password with me. And then on the second try, I guessed it and it opened it up. And that's how I started to like uncover some of these.
So when I read that in your story, I actually had to reread it. And I'll tell you why. It was so unusual.
Yeah.
It was so unusual that clearly spirit opened that up.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. And that to me is the first clue of Sean wanting to help. And then there's been so many ways that he has shown up that I don't write about a lot of these in the book. But one of the things is like I had to build up the chops to be a writer, because I didn't want it just to be my journal. I wanted it to be something that people would want to read. And so I went to my very first writing workshop, and there was someone there who was also widowed. And I guess in between the sessions, she told her new husband about me. And when the thing was over, I was about to pull away. I was in my car, and then suddenly someone knocked on my window, and I rolled the window down, and it was this woman's husband, and he was a shaman, and he gave me an eagle feather, which Kelly's got a big expression on her face, because eagles like kept showing up for me. And then like a feather is also like a quill, right? So I felt like it meant like it's permission to tell the story. That's the meaning that I sort of.
And let's tell the audience how you came to James and to me was through a dear friend that James has always called Mama Eagle.
And she calls me Eaglet.
The baby eagle. Oh, wow.
When you started writing it, and because I know that when we write books, when we do any inspirational work, creating works. The spirit world works with us, that intelligence. And did you feel him, working with you? And if you did feel him coming, and in your experiences with him when you had this experience, did you feel his energy? And if you did feel his energy, did it feel a little different?
So at first, when the first things that started to come, they were so overwhelming to me, and I was still in my state of anger with him that I was having a hard time because my light bulbs were all burning out, my TV and stereo were coming on by themselves, and I was so mad at him because I had found these betrayals. I was still really raging, and so I was like, what, are you haunting us now? And if you are, get out. Because I wasn't receptive to any kind of messaging from him. But then there's this, I took some action to kind of discharge my anger on a Christmas Eve, the first Christmas Eve, which was about 6 weeks after he had passed away. And then on the next morning, it was Christmas morning, I went for a walk in a place that we always used to go, and it was an extremely cold day. Like in Fahrenheit, I'm not very good at the conversion, but I think it's like minus 31 Fahrenheit. Like that's so cold that your eyelashes would freeze and you
Wow.
can't. And as I was walking down this path, I saw an eagle, which I had never seen an eagle there, and eagles are not usually in this part of the world at this time of year. And so it was, and that, so this is to answer your question, James, like, what I felt a very strong connection to Sean because he took a picture of every eagle that he ever saw.
Oh gosh.
And
Oh
so
my gosh.
I took my gloves off in the freezing cold to try to take a picture of
I'm
the
gonna
eagle.
cry. Wow.
Yeah. And so that's that was the first time that my heart sort of softened, and I started to think like, okay, maybe this is him, and maybe, maybe he's trying to kind of help clean up the mess that got left behind, if that
And
makes
did
sense.
that push you on to go see a medium or
Yeah, not right away, because I was kind of toggling between, but I did eventually go to see a medium, and
you were mentioning it wasn't a good experience.
it wasn't a great experience because I had I think a couple of things. I think I was trying to make her prove it to me. So I don't think I was a very receptive
Right.
or
Okay.
good, easy to work with client. But also the things that she was saying felt so
General.
general and so textbook to what, like, if there's such a thing as a typical widow who, didn't
He
find out
loved
all these
you.
horrible
Yes.
secrets. So she would say, like, I see a mantle or I see a ring, like those kinds of things. And I was like, well, yeah, but you do see me like taking my ring and throwing it across the room, because that's what I did with the ring. And so anyway, I left feeling really disappointed and kind of mad at myself for trying to believe. And so I would love to know what you think
When is
when
your
you hear.
birthday, Jessica? When is your birthday?
My birthday is September 16th.
Oh, so
Oh
you're a
my
Virgo
gosh.
like we are.
Yeah, your birthday's right before my birthday. That's an interesting time. That would make you extremely psychic, honey. Very psychic.
Very
And
sensitive.
also it actually means the healer. So this story, in my belief system, you and Sean had arranged a lot of work on the other side to have this experience. And I think it's to help thousands and thousands, if not millions of people with this deep story. It's a big story. It's up there with Eat, Pray, Love with a twist.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what do you think you learned from it, Jessica?
Well, in terms of there's a couple of big learnings, but in terms of what I was trying to explore with writing the book, it was a question like, can relationships heal across the veil of death? And I'm sure for you that's like an obvious answer, but for me it wasn't obvious. And what I feel like, it feels to me like, yes, we did, and that we had a lot that was unresolved, but that we were able to sort of figure it out and clean things up together. And that the awareness that kind of thing might be possible, it just feels so huge. It feels so huge and I'm sure that's probably why people come to talk to you when there's something unresolved and they want to have a sense of peace or some kind of feeling of resolution.
And when you came to the betrayal, the end of it, how did that How were you healed? Is it? Did you? All right, I'm going to say it. Did you have to come to a place of forgiveness?
Yeah, so
And have you yet, or is it still taking a little time?
it's I feel like I have, and I also feel um I guess I'm hedging a little bit because part of me thinks like no one ever has to forgive anyone, and so I don't want anyone to feel like I'm telling them like you must forgive someone who hurt you, but it almost feels like we got to a place where I could deeply understand this person, and so in a place of compassion where it didn't feel like I needed to forgive, it felt like a more like
An
just
awareness.
an awareness of like a common understanding, and
Well,
that just kind of melted away the barrier that was between us, and it was like nothing, there was nothing to forgive is sort of what it felt like. Yeah.
was it possible because you talked about his mental illness and
Yeah.
you talked about with bipolar and you talked about with drug addiction and in bipolar when there's mania and he had bipolar 1, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think that if he was never diagnosed, and so I pieced this together from my own, understanding plus family history, that it would have been mixed states bipolar, which I didn't
Okay.
even know was a diagnosis at
Yeah.
the time,
Yeah.
and so that he had these very rapid cycles. If he had had that long cycle that I understood from my own family history, I would have been sure that like he
Okay.
needed
Yeah.
treatment, but because he was cycling so fast, it
Yeah.
just seemed like he had a very short fuse, and that he was, and I thought he was managing well because off the top, Kelly, when you said it's a cautionary tale, I think it is in the sense of like how well can you ever really know someone, but
Yeah.
also for Sean, because he was such a high achiever and he was so determined and he worked so hard and he was about to take over as CEO of a corporation a month before he died, and so it's just that feeling like I feel like in a lot of ways it's a cautionary tale too to somebody who's driven like that and who
Yeah.
is not addressing, like he has
His
to have
own
known.
his
Yeah.
own mental issues,
Yeah.
own mental needs because I
It's his
remember
escapism. It's his escapism to succeed and to work.
it would have been an escapism, but it was also, I mean, he would be up for 3 or 4 days and he wouldn't eat and then he would just keep going. I mean, that's a real rapid cycler. That's a tough diagnosis,
Was he a
especially,
Capricorn? Was he a
well,
Capricorn?
His
Curious.
birthday was November 16th.
Oh, Scorpio.
Scorpio,
Intense.
yeah.
yeah.
Intense. Okay.
Wow.
And
Wow.
Scorpio, the mediumistic sign. So no surprise it comes back to you all the time. Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
interesting.
Yeah. Wow. I loved what you said about therapy. And I thought this was
Kelly,
just,
but before you go on, if you don't mind, Kelly, I
okay.
just want to find out because a lot of people here, your story when you first met him, and when you first met him, what did you think? How was he? And when did you first notice there were some changes?
He was
If you
so.
don't mind me going back to
Yeah,
that.
no, for sure. Yeah, we met when we were both English teachers in Japan back in the 90s, and
Wow.
so we worked for the same company in different cities, and we were fast friends. He was so funny, delightful, very charismatic and charming, and he was in a lot of ways a really stand-up guy. And so how I ended up falling in love with him is because he always was almost like he just always was in my corner and always had my back, and I just thought this is someone that I could build a life with, and we built an amazing life. Like that's the strange thing, um is that he almost seemed to, like, when I see what he was going through and what he was hiding, it's almost superhuman to be able to, like, on one side be so high functioning and do all of these things, and on the other side have like just the darkest secrets and this kind of tortured addictive way of living that he was hiding from everyone, not only me.
And how far into the marriage did you know that something was different? That he was hiding.
Well, he I would say that it was just sort of gradual. So he always had mood swings, and I knew that that we both had some mental health stuff in the family, and he had those tendencies, but it wasn't until probably the last 3-ish years, that things were really magnified, and there was just a series of his mom passing. We had been living in Singapore, we moved back to Calgary, he got let go from his job. There was just, like, a bunch of major, major transitions, and that he was not doing well. I knew that, and so Yeah, but looking back, I can see he was always the same person. Do you know, like, I think
Yeah.
that I could have probably seen things a little sooner if I'd known what I was looking for. So yeah,
What
does
was
that
the first thing you found out betrayal wise? Was it the other woman? Was it the drugs? Was it the what was the first
it
thing you
was it
noticed?
was the it was drugs, and
Right.
it wasn't like he wasn't on like it was just marijuana at that time, but it was so much, and he had lied about because it was legal. It's a long story. I don't need to go into all the
Yeah, yeah,
details, but
yeah,
it was legal in Colorado, and he had been
yeah.
working down there. And so I asked him, "Have you tried legal marijuana?" And he said no. And then when I opened his wallet, I found this frequent Bud buyer card that had 7 out of 10
How
stamp
fun!
punched
Wow.
out of it, and he'd barely been down there. And I'm like, well, how am I? so, so it was, and then yeah, and it
Yeah,
was just that little thing, and then, but that was the tip of the iceberg. And then I found out, I think there was, this massive cache of pornography. There
yeah,
were other women. There was like he was hiding debt and he had spent so much money. And so there, yeah, there was a lot
wow.
to kind of
I love
reconcile.
when you went after one of the women.
Tell us about tell us
Yeah,
about
tell
that.
us about that. It was really extraordinary because sometimes people will not do that, and some people will just do that.
Ye
I loved it.
Yeah, I kind of skirted both of that because I had the impulse to go after her right away, but I checked myself and waited until there was like, I let a bit of time pass so that, um, I yeah, I don't don't wanna go into all the detail, but I didn't want to hurt her husband or children, but I wanted her to be accountable for what I felt that she
Yeah.
had done, and I wanted her to take some responsibility. And so yeah, I concocted a revenge plan to unleash on her on Christmas Eve. And and so I did it, and the kind of meanness in it was the timing that it was on Christmas Eve. But that was in the end, as much as it doesn't make me look the best, and I'm not sure revenge is like always the best impulse to follow. The next day was when I had that saw the eagles, and so it did feel at some way like discharging the anger was good for me. Like, and I just like let go of some of the things that weren't mine. I don't know what you make of that that when you hear it, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I thought it was brilliant. I thought all of it was actually. Did you ever experience Sean in your dreams?
Mm.
I would have a recurring dream, and basically it was like this. He would come home with his suitcase from a trip because he traveled on business a lot. He'd walk in the door. I would meet him like so happily, and then as soon as I looked in his eyes, I remembered what he did, and I said, "Get out." And that happened over and over and over. And so he there was no reconciliation happening in the dream world for us. And it's funny because later on, um, I did go and see another medium, and she told me, like, she ended up like being bang on about everything. And she said, he's trying to come through your dreams, but he can't get through, so he's flashing your lights. And and so yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So, and you had other experiences with healers, I think.
Yeah, so this is another thing that didn't used to happen. Um, I was I was having a lot of physical pain, but like back pain especially, and so I was going to see a massage therapist, and this happened 3 different times that someone who was doing body work, giving me a massage, would get some kind of vision or intuitive hit and then tell me about it. And so, like, yeah, that didn't like, that never used to happen, and then it happened with 3 different people, and a couple of them told me that I was gonna write a book, and, like, part of the way through, I was already writing a book, and they told me, that I would, which was another bit of
Right.
data that I put into my data set that, yeah, that I was on the right track. And the other thing was that my perceptions were sort of altered in a way that it felt like books were guiding me, like books, like in the library, I would see them like more clearly, like one more than the other, and then that one would have direct relevance to my life. And so it just kind of felt like a breadcrumb trail unfolding of, what the next steps would be.
It was a spiritual awakening.
Yeah. And you're a
Yeah.
and you're a teacher. You're a healer and teacher. So you're teaching people with this healing. And did you feel different, Jessica, after you wrote the book? And how did you feel different, if you did, about the relationship, about yourself, or about the world?
I feel I mostly still feel like myself, but I know that there has to be something different about me because I'm standing up and putting a book onto the world where I'm a very private person. Like I would never normally talk about any of the private things in my life. And so that is a big change. And then the other big change is I was just talking with someone about unconditional love and what I used to think what that meant was just that somehow you were supposed to just love people no matter what they did and no matter how they conflicted with your values and morals. It's just like love them unconditionally. Love and I didn't know really how people got there. I thought, oh, this is why it's only saints and angels like, who can love this way. But what I feel like I've learned is that unconditional love comes when I can face the truth. And so when I'm looking at what is really going on, it's like I feel like unconditional love comes to support me and support the whole situation. And so it's the thing that kind of helped me move out of denial into being able to hold a bigger picture, a bigger context.
Wow. Wow. I can see it's still very moving for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're so sensitive. You're a very, very sensitive person. Yeah.
You're the perfect one to have written this story because you
Ah.
can hold that space for people. I bet you end up having seminars for this kind of a situation, for deep healing for people.
You should,
Yeah,
Jessica.
you really should. You have the capacity to hold this. It's a
I
big story. It's a
Yeah.
big betrayal is huge. It's one of the big reasons people come to Earth. They're going to experience it. So it's all about growth and our soul expanding and growing. And betrayal teaches us a lot about
And,
how we respond and how it plays out.
and Kelly, don't you agree that we all learn, we all set up our lives before we come back? Those
Yes.
lessons, we did our curriculum,
Yeah.
and you souls connect and
Yep.
agree to certain circumstances in order for both of you to learn certain aspects. Yeah. So,
If you were going to give people some steps who have been in a betrayal situation and would like some how to learn how to get to a forgiveness place, what would you send them? What area? How would you go with that?
I think that one of the things, and it's hard to talk about this because you can't really do it at an intellectual level, but is that it's so, with the shame of being betrayed, it's so easy to turn that on yourself. This is what I felt like I was doing. I should have known. How could I be so stupid? You know, all of those kinds of thoughts. And so that does not help you. And it is like, I would really just say, it is not your fault. It is very easy to deceive people for a variety of reasons, especially these days with technology. Like there's so many things that like and so it's not your fault for having been deceived. And it's one of admitting that we've been deceived is one of the hardest things that we can do. And so I think I would just say, you know, be as gentle as you can to understand you didn't do anything wrong and that it's nothing about who you are or how you are, and that you can you can recover from it and you can like get your life back. And we have to trust each other, right? Like I didn't heal from this alone. And so we like finding something to trust, which might just be that you're going to be okay, like to keep the faith in yourself. Yeah. And then part of the gentleness too is, get as much sleep as you can. Like I can't tell you how much I slept and how tired and exhausted I was. And so then I had to be kind, like not judging myself that I was being lazy or something like that. But it takes rest. And
I'm just curious, did a therapist ever diagnose him as a sociopath when they were talking to you?
no, and I don't think that that would have been an accurate diagnosis for Sean because he really did love and care for people, and that was one of the hard things off the bat for me because he was so beloved. Like he mentored people in his field, and he had so many strong friendships, and he definitely didn't exhibit the tendencies of someone who doesn't care about other people. I think he really did care. And I think, it sounds strange to say, but I think he really did love me. And I think how much he loved me is why he couldn't show him the parts of himself that he hated to me, because he was too afraid that he would lose his family. And I don't think he wanted that to happen. Yeah.
Well, you can have both positions. I believe he absolutely loved you. I do believe that. After reading the book, I do believe that. And he also can have this other situation.
Totally.
That's more than one thing going.
Absolutely. Lots of things can be true at the same time. And that was
I think that happens a lot, Kelly.
Yeah.
A lot of people have different, I don't think different personalities, but they have different parts of themselves. And is it quite common that people keep things hidden or live double lives or triple lives even? Is that, yeah.
Oh, it is possible. Yes, James. Very much so. And at some point you talk about him having remorse, and especially when he passes.
Yeah, that was a thing, like one of the books that sort of jumped out at me. It told a story of someone who basically her husband betrayed her, and it was a very similar kind of, there were little details that were exactly like my situation. But then in that story, the husband basically died of remorse. And so I felt like, could it be that because Sean had a heart attack, he was only 47, he had just had a full physical and been given a clean bill of health. And I wonder like what caused his heart, and that kind of thing. And so was it like, yeah. And anyway, but I would love to know from your point of view, when people die and they're not at their most healthy, integrated, best selves. Because you had mentioned purgatory off the top, James, and I ask some questions about purgatory in my story. Like, do you think people hang around in some other level trying to help the world of the living? Because that's what it seemed like was happening with me, but I don't know. Like, yeah,
they do, and every spirit is different, but he has a lot going on, and we see it from the human point of view. But I believe that souls, that we are all souls, but 30% of the souls here, 70% is outside the physical. So when he leaves, goes back to that space of the soul. And the hard thing, of course, when they pass over, regret is a very difficult thing to live with, and hurt. How we hurt you, and regret and resentment. But again, there might have been this mental condition that he had. I think sometimes, Jessica, that souls come back for different reasons. Sometimes to work with the mental body, to perfect that mental body. Sometimes come back to perfect the physical body. Sometimes emotional body. And I do think that does happen. And I think they do stay around on a certain level to let the loved ones know that they're around, that they're not dead. And they will try every single way they possibly can to get a sign through, signal through, come through dreams, come through, different signs of perhaps birds or like the eagle, and different ways. Even sometimes they will project in a way into your mind. You're looking at someone and they go, wow, that looks just like Sean. It happens. It does happen that way. And I think that they're helping manipulate that, work that to happen. They tend to have, of course, those regrets, resentments. And I'm sure he just wants to say, he's sorry he hurt you in the way he that.
Yeah.
And but I do think I agree with Kelly. I think that you two had a soul agreement together.
And I do think that totally, James. And to even go a little further, when James asked you what your birthday was, and you said September 16th, that actually means the writer. So the contract with him would have been, look, we're going to go through some stuff here, and it's going to be deep. And you were like, okay, let's sign up here. I mean, because when you met him, did you have any idea that you'd marry this man? Did you have any idea?
Not when I first met him. I liked him, and we had a strong friendship, but he had a crush on me first. And I'm very tall. I'm like 6 feet tall, and he was 5'7". So there was a little bit of a height barrier in my mind. So it was not obvious to me that we would become a couple. But as our friendship deepened, and then when we really did fall in love, we did talk about I think it's like in the Kurt Vonnegut language, he talks about like a karass, I think is the name of it. It's like a group of souls that travel through the world together. And so that was what he thought, we were part of that same group.
Wow.
And so that kind of adds up with what you were saying about, having the contract. And then James, when you were saying about the seeing them, that happened to me once at the funeral. And then it just happened to me again a couple of weeks ago when my box of books was delivered. I went over to a family barbecue with all, Sean's brothers and sister. And I was in the kitchen and I was going to open the box to show them to everyone. And I saw Sean sitting in the lawn chair, but it was his brother, but it was Sean. Like, it was like so clearly him. And I just had this moment of like, whoa. So I think, that's exactly what you were talking about.
And Jessica, your book, I'm just telling you right now, I see it. You're going to win an award. There's going to be a golden label on the front of the cover. And I think it's going to be a number of languages. I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I know you're going to write some more books. I just know that you're.
And I think you're going to do seminars all over the world with this.
Thank you. I would love to do seminars. I think it would be,
you're a natural. Natural healer, and you have a story, and even helping other people write their stories. Do something like that.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
One thing you said, Jessica, which I just have to repeat because it's so important. You said, and you got to realize that it's not your fault. You beat yourself up, and people should realize, don't do that to yourself. Be gentle with yourself, and that's so important because people will often say, and Virgos, like with 3 Virgos here, Virgos can be very self-critical, but we always beat ourselves up, and we should never do that. I love that you talked about that because it's really important. It's an important message.
I also loved what you said about counseling, which I have to read this quote because I thought it was so profound. You said, counseling is like setting a broken bone. It doesn't take the pain away, but it puts things in place so eventually they heal properly.
Oh, it's beautiful. Wow. You're a natural.
You're natural.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, thank you.
And you had a child together, yes?
Yeah, so we have one son. He's just about to turn 18 in a few days, and he was 9 when his dad died. So he, it's been it's a rough road, I think, growing up with that kind of grief, but he's done really well, and he's a beautiful, wonderful human being, and I couldn't be prouder of our son.
And do you share with him little things about his dad?
Yeah, I do, and as he's grown up, there's been sort of age appropriate moments for us to talk about, things that went on with his dad. And so nothing that's in this book really was a surprise to him. He did read it in January. And I was so nervous. I was so nervous because I know I wouldn't have wanted to read these things about my parents as a teenager or maybe ever. But he took the book, he went downstairs. 2 weeks later, I mean, he'd come up in the meantime, but 2 weeks later, he came into the kitchen and said, I'm halfway through the book. If I imagine it's about other people, it's very well paced and interesting. I just laughed so much because he plays Dungeons and Dragons and he's a dungeon master, so he's very into like the storytelling and the world building, and so I appreciated that he could look at it from outside of it just being about us, but I think in the end it has helped our relationship. Like, I think he sees me as a human being, which I don't know if I saw my parents as human beings until
I'm gonna cry.
Yeah. And don't forget, he would have contracted you, both of you, as parents.
That's
yeah
right. So,
Jessica, a question I have for you. What about another relationship?
Great question.
Yeah, I have a sweetheart. We met through online dating, but this is another funny, strange thing. And this isn't in the book at all. I was saying that body workers were like getting intuitive hits. And so I went to someone for craniosacral therapy, and she said, did your husband die? And I'm like, yes. And she's like, well, do you have a boyfriend? And I'm like, yes. And she said, your husband sent him to you. And I'm like, what? I had never thought of that in a million years. And so I went, William is the name of my boyfriend. And I went to him and said, and he's an engineer and was atheist, and like I thought he'd laugh me out of the building, but I'm like, so this person said this, and he said, that has crossed my mind, and I'm like, and I'm like, why? And he's like, because I know that he would want someone who loves you as much as he did. But he's also a very different person. Like they could not be more opposite in terms of personality. And so it's that I guess that would be another thing that I'd tell someone who's going through this is like, don't count yourself out for love. Do you know, like you're lovable. You can be loved and love other people.
And Jessica, that's a really common thing that the partner that passed over before will look for the best person they can for their partner on the earth. I've seen it. Kelly, you've heard it
very much.
thousands of times. They want you to experience love, and they will do what they can to do that for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
And then as you heal, he heals on the other side.
Totally.
Well, that's the thing that was the most eye-opening. And this is, our friend, how we met Peggy. She helped a good friend of mine declutter, and that friend came to help me declutter. And so that's how we all connected with one another. And it was through that friend, her name's Liz, who came to my house. We spent 3 days. She took all of these pornography-filled computers out of my house to get their hard drives wiped. We got rid of all of everything that was in the basement, that was like all the home handyman jobs, all the unfinished business. And when it was gone, I felt this whoosh of energy. And I said to Liz, this was healing for Sean too. I feel like somehow we this was freeing for him. And so that was like one of the most amazing things. And I do write about it, but I don't know if I could convey fully like how much I felt release and relief and freedom, not only for myself but for the relationship between us.
And for the record, James and I, our very first guest was Peggy Fitzsimmons to talk about her declutter book, which is a great book, everybody.
Jessica, I just got to say, as you're speaking and you're talking about this, and I just get very, very emotional, and I want to say you have courage. You have courage.
Sure do.
Thank you. I think that's the other thing. I heard someone say it's Stephen Jenkinson. I don't know if you know him, but he's a Canadian guy, but he has a PhD in divinity school from Harvard, and he's also was a physician who helped a lot of people transition, and so he's kind of was known as like the death guy for a long time in the Canadian. Anyway, he said something that has stuck with me, which is that we succumb to courage. So basically we fall into courage. And that is definitely what it feels like to me, that it just I have no other choice. So I just kind of succumb, and then courage lifts me up to do the next thing. And so I guess that's part of why I think we all have that in us, we can all be courageous. It's not something you have to muscle your way into. You can find it by falling. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I can't wait to hear how this book does. I already know it's going to be a bestseller, as James said. We both know that.
Yeah. The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards, everybody. So it'll be available when? At the end of July?
So it's available to pre-order now, and then the release date is July 30th. And so that's not very very far away from tonight. It's coming up real soon.
It's a great congratulations, Jessica.
Thank you.
And thank you for being on our show here. Yeah. Really appreciate it. And
so admire you and your work.
Thank you for inviting me. It's such a joy and an honor to get to meet you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, James.
Renee. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Bye.